My world was flipped on its axis when I was 12. That morning began like any other. Dad kissed me goodbye before leaving for his job as a site manager at the construction company. Mom, engrossed in her phone, barely registered his departure. I recall thinking how odd their current dynamic was compared to how they used to be. My name is Melanie Carter, and that was the last time I saw my father alive. He suffered a massive heart attack at work that afternoon. I was in math class when the principal summoned me to her office. Mom was already there, her mascara impeccably applied despite the news she'd just received. "Your father's gone, Melanie," she said, her voice unnervingly composed. I dissolved into tears, but Mom remained seated, patting my back with a disconcerting mechanical rhythm. That evening, I inadvertently overheard her speaking to her friend Linda. Mom's voice, though hushed, was clear enough to penetrate the thin walls of our suburban house. "Actually, Linda, this might be for the best," she confided. "Being a widow is far more respectable than being divorced. Plus, I retain everything without the legal battles." She actually laughed. I know. I'll play the grieving widow at the funeral. I've already selected the ideal black dress." I sat on the staircase, hand clamped over my mouth to stifle a scream. Dad's sister, Aunt Sarah, was the only one who saw through Mom's facade. At the funeral, while everyone offered condolences to my supposedly devastated mother, Aunt Sarah stood shaking her head sadly. She knew. She had always known how Mom treated Dad. Mom's recovery was swift. Within 3 months, a man named Richard Thompson, a father of 2 from a previous marriage, 11-year-old Brandon and 10-year-old Emma, was a regular dinner guest. Mom prepared elaborate meals for their visits, a gesture she'd never extended to Dad. "Melanie, honey," she'd say one evening, her voice saccharine, "Richard and I have something to tell you." I anticipated the announcement. Their intertwined hands on the couch, Mom radiating adolescent joy, made it evident. "We're getting married," she declared. "Isn't it wonderful? You'll have a new father and siblings." I forced a smile, my stomach churning. "That's great, Mom. Congratulations." Richard offered a smile, but his eyes remained distant. "Brandon and Emma are thrilled to gain a new sister," he added. I'd already witnessed the way his children looked at me during their visits, as if I were an unpleasant residue clinging to their expensive shoes. That night, I called Aunt Sarah, sobbing uncontrollably. She listened patiently, then offered words I'll never forget. "Sometimes, sweetie, the family you create is more significant than the family you're born into. Remember that." Brandon and Emma moved in the week following the honeymoon, immediately appropriating the best rooms, including my playroom, which was promptly converted into Emma's art studio. My protests were met with, "Don't be selfish, Melanie. We need to make them feel welcome." Mom was a changed woman after marrying Richard. She devoted hours to Emma's homework and Brandon's soccer practices, while I ate dinner alone in my room. The adoration in her gaze when she looked at Richard was as though he'd personally hung the celestial bodies for her. She'd never looked at Dad that way. "Brandon requires new soccer cleats," she'd announce, or "Emma's enrolled in art classes this summer." There were always funds for their needs, while I learned to cease asking for anything. Even basic school supplies were met with sighs and eye rolls, as if requesting pencils was an unreasonable demand. They embarked on family trips, nothing extravagant, just weekend getaways to nearby cities or camping trips to state parks. I was never included. "You'll just be bored," Mom would explain without even glancing my way as she packed snacks for Brandon and Emma. "Besides, someone needs to look after the cat." These trips usually found me at Aunt Sarah's cozy cottage, which felt more like home than our own house. Childless herself, she treated me like the daughter she'd never had. "This isn't right, Melanie," she'd say, watching me unpack my overnight bag for what felt like the 100th time. "A mother shouldn't show such blatant favoritism." I'd shrug, pretending it didn't sting. "At least I have you, Aunt Sarah." One evening, at 16, I decided to raise the topic of college during dinner. I'd been researching universities, nurturing dreams of studying business management. Mom, I began cautiously, selecting my moment when everyone seemed content. I wanted to discuss college applications. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. College, Melanie? We can't afford to send you to college. We need to prioritize Brandon and Emma's education. Brandon smirked across the table, and Emma's satisfied grin was unconcealed. Richard continued eating, seemingly oblivious to the conversation. Later, I confronted Mom in the kitchen. What about Dad's money? I asked. He had life insurance, and he'd been saving for years. Mom's expression hardened. I've spent that money caring for you for the past 4 years, she retorted. Food, clothes, shelter. Did you think all that was free? Stop being so entitled, Melanie. You can't just demand things from me. I was speechless, stunned by her icy tone and the blatant falsehood of her words. Dad had worked tirelessly to secure my future, and now it was gone. Gone. Squandered on her new, idyllic family while I remained a spectator. The following weekend, I sought refuge at Aunt Sarah's, tears still stinging my eyes. We sat at her kitchen table, the aroma of fresh coffee permeating the air as I recounted Mom's heartless dismissal of my college aspirations. Aunt Sarah listened intently, cradling her coffee mug. When I finished, she rose wordlessly and vanished into her study. I heard drawers opening and closing before she reappeared, holding a thick envelope. Your father visited me about 2 weeks before his death, she explained, sliding the envelope across the table. It was peculiar. He seemed apprehensive, almost as if he had a premonition. He entrusted me with this and made me vow to safeguard it until you were ready for college. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a bank statement revealing a substantial savings account in my name, with Aunt Sarah as trustee. Dad had been discreetly setting aside money for years. He said your mother had been behaving differently, Aunt Sarah clarified softly. He wanted to ensure your future was secure, regardless of what happened. The money had been accumulating interest all this time. Tears welled up. But these were tears of gratitude and love for the father who continued to protect me even in death. We can't tell Mom about this, I declared, wiping my eyes. Aunt Sarah nodded in agreement. For the next 2 years, I dedicated myself to my studies, concealing my college plans. Brandon and Emma seized every opportunity to remind me of my supposedly bleak future. Hey, Melanie, Brandon would sneer in the hallway. I heard the diner downtown is hiring dishwashers. Better submit your application early. Emma would chime in, maybe if you're lucky, they'll let you bus tables too. They'd laugh as if it were the most hilarious joke imaginable. I'd simply walk past, my silence infuriating them. Then came graduation day. I had barely removed my cap and gown when Mom and Richard summoned me to the living room for a serious discussion. They sat on the couch like judges about to pronounce a sentence, while I stood before them. Melanie, Richard began, his tone stern. You're 18 now. We've been generous, but you need to realize you can't live here indefinitely. You need to get a job and start supporting yourself. I smiled serenely. I understand completely. I'll be moved out by next week. They exchanged surprised glances, clearly anticipating resistance or tears. Mom opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Well, good, Richard finally managed. That's very mature of you. Neither of them inquired about my plans or how I intended to support myself. They were too relieved by my easy acquiescence to risk asking questions that might complicate matters. Moving day arrived sooner than expected. I packed my belongings into 4 cardboard boxes and 2 suitcases. It was astonishing how little I had accumulated over the years, almost as if I had subconsciously been preparing for this departure. Aunt Sarah arrived promptly at 9 a.m. in her blue Honda. I watched from my bedroom window as she parked, half expecting Mom or someone else to investigate, but the house remained silent, though I could detect movement behind the curtains of Emma's room. As we drove away, I observed my childhood home receding in the side mirror until it vanished completely. I didn't cry. Instead, a sense of lightness grew with each mile that separated us from that house of meticulously constructed charades. I spent the summer working at the Sunshine Cafe, serving coffee and sandwiches to regulars who tipped generously and treated me like family. The owner, Mrs. Peterson, even allowed me to pick up extra shifts to save more for college expenses. September arrived, and I boarded a plane to begin my new life at Marshall State University, 3 states removed from everything I'd known. The business management program was demanding, but I immersed myself completely. My roommate, Jessica, became my first true friend since middle school. She didn't know my entire story initially, but when I confided in her, she simply hugged me and said, "They're lost, girl. They're lost." Mom's Facebook page became my portal into the life I'd left behind. There they were, the perfect family, beaming at Brandon's soccer tournaments, celebrating Emma's art show triumphs, taking vacation selfies at the beach. The captions invariably read like marketing slogans, "So proud of our amazing kids," or "Nothing better than family time." I was never mentioned, not even once. It was as if I had never existed. Holidays were spent at Aunt Sarah's, cooking together and watching old movies. We established our own traditions, and they held more significance for me than any forced family dinner ever had. Sometimes, she'd catch me browsing Mom's social media posts and gently remove my phone. "Don't torment yourself," she'd advise. "You're creating your own story now." And I was. I graduated summa cum laude, with job offers already lined up, thanks to my internships and academic achievements. Jessica's father, Mr. Reynolds, headed a prominent marketing firm and had taken note of my work during a class project showcase. "We need sharp minds like yours," he'd remarked during my interview. "Your professors speak very highly of you." I began in a junior analyst role, but I wasn't satisfied to remain there. I worked late, accepted additional projects, and studied market trends in my spare time. Within 5 years, I'd received 2 promotions and saved enough for a down payment on my own apartment. The day I signed the mortgage papers, standing in my empty living room, keys clutched in my hand, I finally allowed myself to cry. They were tears of joy, of pride, of accomplishment, knowing I'd achieved this on my own terms. Then came an even bigger surprise. Approximately 7 years after starting at the company, Mr. Reynolds summoned me to his office. "We're establishing a new role," he explained, sliding a folder across his desk. "Senior Director of Strategic Development. The board and I believe you're the perfect fit." I opened the folder and nearly gasped at the proposed salary. It was more money than I'd ever envisioned earning, especially at my age. I never felt the need to publicize my life online. While I maintained social media accounts, I primarily shared the occasional photo of a sunset or a coffee shop. Aunt Sarah was the only person aware of my promotions, my new apartment, and the sleek black Mercedes I purchased as a reward for securing the director position. "You've earned every bit of it," she'd say with pride whenever I shared my accomplishments. Meanwhile, Brandon and Emma's social media feeds were a constant stream of unremarkable boasts. Brandon would pose next to his used Hyundai Elantra with captions like "Living the dream, surpassed, blessed, our luxury life," while Emma shared pictures of herself at the local mall, tagging designer brands she clearly couldn't afford. One post in particular amused me. Brandon, standing next to his car at a local car show, captioning it, "When hard work pays off, success entrepreneur." I read this while sitting in my Mercedes AMG, worth more than his annual salary, feeling no compulsion to prove anything to anyone. Then came the message that changed everything. It appeared on my Facebook one Tuesday morning. "Melanie, it's your mother. My 55th birthday is next month, and I'm celebrating at an upscale restaurant, LeBlanc. You've probably never heard of it. I expect you to attend. It's on the 15th, 7 p.m. Sharp. Don't embarrass me." I stared at the message, rereading it several times. 12 years of silence, and this was her method of contact? No. How are you? No attempt at reconciliation, just a demand to attend her party, complete with a subtle jab about the restaurant's supposed prestige. I almost deleted it immediately, but something held me back. Curiosity, perhaps, or a desire to witness the unfolding events. I called Mr. Reynolds and requested a week off, then booked a flight to my hometown that evening. Over tea at her cozy kitchen table, Aunt Sarah voiced the question I'd been pondering. What are you planning to give her? I smiled, displaying the confirmation email on my phone. A luxurious vacation package to the Maldives. 2 weeks at a 5-star resort, including first-class flights, valued at approximately $15,000. Aunt Sarah's eyes widened. Melanie, that's excessive. She doesn't deserve it. Oh, I know she doesn't. I chuckled, sipping my tea. But can you picture her expression when she realizes what she's been missing all these years? The daughter she discarded turned out to be more successful than she could have imagined. I want to witness her reaction when she grasps how wrong she was about me. You're a little bit wicked, Aunt Sarah chuckled, shaking her head. I love it. On the evening of Mom's birthday, I donned my Chanel dress, elegant in its simplicity, bearing a price tag that could have purchased 10 of the ostentatious outfits I later observed that night. I intentionally took a taxi to the restaurant, amused by how this would reinforce their assumptions about my life. LeBlanc was precisely as I anticipated, the type of establishment that impressed those who hadn't experienced truly fine dining, the kind of place that served frozen seafood but garnished desserts with gold leaf. I'd had business dinners at venues that made this look like a diner. The hostess escorted me to a private room where the party was already underway. Mom sat at the head of the table, her sequin dress shimmering under the chandelier. Richard sat beside her, flanked by Brandon and Emma like loyal subjects. The remaining seats were occupied by relatives I hadn't seen in over a decade. Aunt Linda, who used to pinch my cheeks too hard, Cousin Rachel, who perpetually boasted about her children, and various other figures from my past. Mom's eyes briefly glanced over me before her lip curled slightly. Oh, Melanie, you came. You could have dressed up a bit more for the occasion. I took a seat at the far end of the table, ready to watch the spectacle unfold. Aunt Linda presented Mom with a scented candle set. It's from that lovely shop at the mall, she explained proudly. Mom cooed over it as if it were made of diamonds. Cousin Rachel gifted a gift card to a local spa for a day of pampering, eliciting more enthusiastic squeals from Mom. The gifts continued: a cookbook, a decorative vase, a basket of bath products. Mom treated each one like a priceless artifact, emphasizing how thoughtful and perfect every gift was. Then came Brandon and Emma's moment. They stood up together, beaming as if they just won the lottery. Mom, Brandon began, and it felt off hearing him use that term for her. Emma and I had pooled our resources to buy you something truly special. Emma displayed a picture on her phone, a 65-inch smart TV, already delivered and installed in your living room. Mom dissolved into tears, embracing them both in a fierce hug. My amazing, kind children. I can't fathom how you manage this. You must have been saving for ages. Finally, everyone's attention shifted to me. I retrieved a small, tastefully packaged box from my purse. Mom's countenance immediately clouded. And what is this supposed to be? Open it and find out, I suggested softly, but she refused. Instead, her face flushed with rage. This is precisely what I anticipated from you, she hissed, showing up in that unremarkable dress, likely the only decent garment you possess, taking a cab because you're too broke for a car, and now presenting me with this insignificant little box. What could possibly be inside that's even remotely suitable as a present? A McDonald's gift certificate? She flung the box at me. It skidded across the table, marring the inexpensive veneer. Brandon and Emma stifled giggles. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, Others seemed to relish the unfolding drama. Richard continued eating his dessert, seemingly oblivious. I calmly picked up the box, brushing off the tablecloth crumbs clinging to its sophisticated wrapping. The room fell silent, anticipating my next move. "You know what's ironic, Mom?" I said, my voice unwavering. "Inside this small box is a receipt for a 2-week luxury trip to the Maldives. First-class airfare, 5-star accommodations, all-inclusive, worth $115,000. The blood drained from her face. Emma's fork clattered to the floor. That's impossible," Mom stammered. "You couldn't possibly afford something like that. You're obviously fabricating this." I couldn't suppress a laugh. "You would know if I could afford it or not, if you'd expressed even the slightest interest in my life over the past 12 years. But let me update you. I'm a senior director at Reynolds Marketing Group. I own my apartment in the city. And that taxi you ridiculed? I took it because I preferred not to leave my Mercedes parked in this neighborhood." Brandon's jaw dropped. Emma had ceased her giggling. "But since you're so certain I'm a failure," I continued, replacing the box in my purse, "and you clearly don't desire anything from me, I won't disrupt your birthday any further. Enjoy your TV. I hear the picture quality is nearly as impressive as the one in my home theater." I exited with my head held high, the click of my heels resonating in the abrupt quiet. The maitre d' hailed a cab, and I went directly to Aunt Sarah's. She was awaiting my arrival, 2 mugs of tea steaming on the end table. I recounted the entire evening. "Some individuals never change," she sighed, shaking her head. "Your mother has always prioritized appearances over substance." We were still conversing when my phone rang. An unfamiliar number, but I recognized the caller. "Melanie, darling," Mom's voice oozed with false sweetness. "I don't know how she got my number. I've been reflecting on what occurred." "Have you?" I responded coolly. "Yes, and I've come to realize I may have been too hasty. If you're still inclined to offer me that gift, I would gladly accept it. We could utilize this as a new beginning. I desire to be a part of your life again. We're family." "No," I said, finally comprehending something fundamental. "We're not family. We're simply individuals who share DNA. And you don't want to mend our relationship. You simply want that vacation package." I terminated the call. My phone buzzed incessantly after I left town. Mom called from various numbers. Her cell, the house phone, even Richard's. When she realized I wouldn't answer, the messages began pouring in. "Melanie, please return my call. We need to discuss this. I've been considering what you said about your career. Perhaps you could assist Brandon in entering the marketing field. He's incredibly imaginative. Emma has expressed interest in interning at a prominent company like yours. It would significantly enhance her college applications. The house requires some renovations, and since you're doing so remarkably well," each message was more transparently self-serving than the last. No apologies, no acknowledgement of the past, merely a ceaseless stream of requests and allusions to my financial success. It resembled a desperate gambler attempting to recoup losses, except Mom hadn't lost money. She'd lost her relationship with her daughter. I perused each message with a peculiar detachment, as though analyzing a case study for work. The tactics were almost admirable in their diversity. Guilt. "I'm your mother? How can you disregard me?" Flattery. "You've become such an accomplished woman." Manipulation. "Family should support family." And even threats. "I'll inform everyone how you abandoned your mother." "Your mother has been relentlessly contacting me," Aunt Sarah informed me over the phone a week after my return. "She even appeared at my house today, if you can believe it, demanding your address." "What did you tell her?" I inquired, already knowing the response. "I told her to leave my property before I summoned the police." Sarah chuckled. You should have witnessed her expression. She insisted she had a right to know her daughter's location. I reminded her that she relinquished that right years ago. I could envision Mom on Aunt Sarah's porch, likely attired in one of her costly ensembles, attempting to intimidate her way into obtaining what she desired. It was the same recurring pattern I'd observed my entire life, but now I perceived it clearly for what it was. Aunt Sarah continued, explaining how Mom hadn't reacted well to the news. She launched into a tirade about our supposed ingratitude, detailing how she'd sacrificed everything for me. The neighbors likely overheard the entire outburst. When she finally grasped that I wouldn't budge, she stormed out and drove off. "Melanie, be careful," Aunt Sarah warned. She seemed really desperate. I reassured her, "I've already blocked her everywhere. Social media, phone, email, everything. And security at my office has instructions not to let her in if she shows up." After hanging up, I wandered through my apartment, taking in everything I'd accomplished. The stylish furniture, the artwork adorning the walls, the cityscape visible through my windows, all earned through my own dedication and effort. I reflected on Mom's recent messages and her sudden interest in my life now that she knew I was financially secure. In the end, the irony was almost comical. She'd discarded our relationship for the facade of a perfect family, and now she was frantically trying to reconnect for the illusion of success. But she had inadvertently taught me a valuable lesson. Family isn't about legal ties. It's about love, support, and being there for each other through thick and thin. I had that with Aunt Sarah. The following morning, I contacted the travel agency and transferred the Maldives vacation package to Sarah Carter. When I informed my aunt, she initially resisted, but I was firm. "You deserve this more than she ever will," I told her. "You've been a better mother to me than she ever was." Aunt Sarah embraced me tightly, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a profound sense of belonging.